What's the darkest secret you found out about a family member / relative? By Ask Reddit.
When I was a kid, we went to my grandma's house every Sunday and all of my uncles and aunts would be there. One day I noticed that one of my uncles didn't show up anymore, so I asked my family where he is. They told me that he wouldn't be able to visit anymore because he moved away. Years later I found out that he raped and killed 2 women and they locked him up.
Well, much like Reddington, they didn't technically lie. He did move away.
My father tried to kill my mother while she was pregnant with me.
Did he go to jail?
No, he did not. I found out about this when I was 20. My mom told me in private. She said back then my father had a drinking problem and he would get really violent sometimes. She said something to him one time, so he grabbed a knife, pushed her next to an open window and put the knife at her throat. Made her choose between jumping from the 4th floor or get her throat slit. My mom said she cried and begged him to not kill her and think of the unborn baby, me. Some neighbors heard the noise and intervened. They managed to take the knife away from him. She was safe. Police didn't get involved. This was during communist times, so back then apparently domestic issues like these were ignored. This was one of the times he was violent with her. My mom is religious and doesn't believe in divorce. They are still together after 45 years. His violent tendencies toned down after me and my brothers were old enough to knock him out if he tried that poo again. I'm the only one in my family, besides my mom, that knows this happened. I've always had problems with him, but I hated him bitterly after my mom told me what happened then and other times as well. I'm not a religious man, but I wish hell existed just so he could rot in it.
This sounds like my friend's family. They're not from my country, but they were here as expats. One day I found out that his family life was poo. Father molested my friend's sister and his mum used to cheat on the dad. This guy only loves his sister. He used to openly say he doesn't give a f about anything in the world. He'd even sell his mum out for a hot meal for his sister. Anyway, one night he comes home to screaming. Turns out his father was caught molesting his sister by his mum, and his mum started attacking him, so he beat her up. When my friend opened the door, he saw his mum and sister crying on the floor and his dad standing over them, red in the face with, I think it was a broom or something, a very average household appliance. He saw red and came to with his mum and sister, along with 7 other neighbors all hanging to his limbs trying to pin him down. He's 6'11" by the way. He beat his dad into the hospital. After the dad was discharged, he just walked out of their life. Came home and saw all his stuff gone. They don't know where he went.
2 years ago I found out that my dad had a wife before my mom and she died in a freak accident on their wedding night. Edited, she was sleepwalking and fell to her death over the balcony, if anyone was wondering.
That is devastating. Imagine having the best day of your life turn into the worst. Oh man, your poor father.
I know, I feel so bad for him. He slept through it and didn't find out until the cops arrived at his door, sad smiley. Now I understand why my dad always worshipped my mother and caters to her every whim, because she can be a little bit of a handful. Also my mom said that when he introduced her to his old friends they were eerily extra super nice to her.
My third cousin was going to be married next day. His fiancée drowned. Can't imagine that load to bear the rest of his life.
My father won't talk about it. I am sorry about your cousin's loss.
I found out that my grandfather's first wife, before my grandma, died of botulism from eating some tomatoes she had canned at home. She could have been saved, but he refused to take her to the doctor because the botulism was her fault. He let her die to teach her a lesson. Edit, they had 2 kids he left motherless.
Guessing she didn't have a choice in whether or not to be the one responsible for canning her own food, either.
Wow, this is incredibly evil.
A few years before he passed, my dad and I had a long heart-to-heart, at the end of which, he told me he wasn't the one to first sleep with my mom on their honeymoon. he caught her in bed with her cousin, with which she had been in love for a long time. He spoke with their pastor, who told him to forgive and forget. That worked, until 6 years later, when he caught her again, with the same cousin. He told me he wanted to leave with me but ultimately decided to stay, because he wanted me to have a family. With all that happened in my childhood, and to him, workaholic, diabetes, heart attack, I wish he'd left and be happy instead.
Well, at least you know he loved you very, very much.
There is strong debate in our family as to whether my aunt fell out of the window of her flat, whether she jumped or was pushed. She survived, but with brain damage, and says she can't remember.
Something similar happened to my grandma. She remarried after my grandpa died and his family was crazy over how it would affect their inheritance. They lived in an old farmhouse that had a root cellar that could only be accessed along one side of the house. She was standing at the top of the concrete stairs and next thing she knew she was at the bottom. She has no memory of how it happened and she still has trouble differentiating colors from her injuries. She suspects it was one of his kids, but we will probably never know. I found out from my dad that one of my cousins isn't related to anyone in the family. My aunt and her mother used to work at a hospital maternity ward and apparently a woman came in one day and gave birth to him and then left the next day without him. My aunt decided to adopt him, but a few months later the woman showed up again asking where he was. They both lied that he was given up and didn't have a clue where he was. They still haven't told my cousin anything.
I wonder what made her left. And what made her come back. Not really dark at all, but surprising. My mild-mannered Buddhist lawyer uncle was International Mr. Leather Daddy's Boy of the Year, sometime in the late 80s.
My great-uncle is a rapist that prefers underage family members. I don't know how many people actually know, but my grandparents certainly do along with his victims, my mom, aunt, and I know at least a few or their cousins but I'm not sure which. But then he found Jesus again so we all have to forgive him and pretend nothing happened. It was before I was born but that's the basic runaround I've gotten from my grandparents. They don't ever actually acknowledge it, just that Tony did bad things but he found God. I eventually put 2 and 2 together about my mom's history or sexual assault and her making sure that me and my female cousins were never left alone with him. And now that I'm in my 20s, that duty has been passed down to me at every family gathering. It's like an unspoken rule that you can't say why, just the warning. Don't leave your daughters alone with him. I'm tired of it though. Tired of shooing little girls away and having to pretend like it's normal. Scoping toddlers out of a predator's arms and acting like everything's fine and I'm just baby crazy. When this is all over, I'm not going to stay quiet anymore. The next time I have to around him I'm taking children right back to their parents with the full effing story of why it's dangerous. I'm tired of having to protect a rapist to keep peace.
Why do you always take them away? Because you're a rapist, Tony. God isn't thrilled about that, by the way.
My dad told me that, before my mom and dad broke up, he hadn't been happy with her for several years. My mother even had a miscarriage at one point, which destroyed the both of them. But he couldn't leave her, because he was afraid that she would hurt or even kill herself. So his only thought was to have a kid with her, so that motherly instinct would hopefully prevent her from killing herself. Are you the child that resulted? What a burden to have to carry.
Well, the thing is, they both still wanted kids, so it's not that bad. The only problem was, my mom's body rejected my dad's sperm, meaning it wasn't easy to have me. With a lot of surgical help, they tried a total of 6 times in the hospital. The 3rd was a miscarriage, and the 6th was me, so they still went through hell to get me. Also, they broke up when I was 2, so I never really noticed anything, and the relationship between them has never been bad for me.
I found out my father raped my sister when I was 11 years old. She was only 7 when he was sexually abusing her.
Is he in prison?
I wish my brother would believe me, considering the FBI did, and my father subsequently went to jail for it and plead guilty. Even still, my brother blames me for tearing our family apart and can't see his child molester father for who he is. When he was arrested, he had something like 300 different photos of kids in his possession and tons of professional photography equipment nobody knew he had.
No, they said there wasn't enough evidence.
This is what happened with my stepfather. I hope your sister is okay.
A great uncle went to prison for statutory rape. It only takes a few minutes around him to know he's disgusting.